Hello, Brobs. It's time to knock out Trousered Apes, Sick Literature in a Sick Society by Duncan Williams. This is the epilogue. Let's get her done, even though no one has commented on it after they requested it. But here we go. Epilogue. This book has grown out of a paper of the same name, which was delivered at Jackson's Mill, West Virginia, before a group of university teachers of English in October 1966. On that occasion, it created a considerable amount of discussion and controversy, lasting well into the night and continuing the following day. Much of the criticism, though by no means all, arose from the fact that of necessity, a paper-length treatment of the subject omitted a great deal that was germane to the issues involved. This persuaded me that the importance and relevance of the subject demanded a more detailed examination. Nothing that has happened on the international or domestic scene since I delivered the lecture has changed my opinion that the Western world and its culture are currently saturated with violence and animalism. No one who reads a newspaper or watches a television news program or who reads an avant-garde novel can doubt the truth of this statement, but few seem aware of the underlying causes of this phenomenon. In order to understand the true nature of the chronic upheaval which is engulfing our culture, and indeed our entire civilization, we must look into the past and attempt to trace its genesis there. For the present is simply an outgrowth of what has gone before. Concluding the Gifford Lectures at Edinburgh in 1947, the historian Christopher Dawson declared the recovery of moral control and the return to spiritual order has now become the indispensable conditions of human survival. The aim of this book has been to reawaken its readers to a sense of urgency regarding these indispensable conditions, believing as I do that the arts in general are not merely a mirror reflecting social and cultural values, but are, on the contrary, powerful forces which shape and mold the way in which people live and behave, a view incidentally held by every major literary critic from Plato to T.S. Eliot. I have examined contemporary literature, drama, music, painting, and those two powerful molders, the cinema and television. In all these various manifestations of the contemporary scene, one finds not only an absence of moral control and spiritual order, but in most instances an overt and deep hostility to any such restraining concepts. Morality, however, always involves a sentiment of submission because it demands the recognition of an authoritative norm, be it religious or secular, external as in former times, or internal, that is, self-imposed. The very terms submission and authoritative appear to be anathemas to an age intoxicated with the concept of freedom, but true liberty is surely not so much external as internal. It demands self-control and a punctilious fulfillment of one's obligations. As Edmund Burke wrote in 1791, men are qualified for civil liberty in exact proportion to their disposition to put moral chains upon their own appetites. Society cannot exist unless a controlling power upon will and appetite be placed somewhere, and the less of it there is within, the more there is without. It is ordained in the eternal constitution of things that men of intemperate minds cannot be free. Their passions forge their fetters. No doubt contemporary writers and artists would assert that violence dramatizes a situation, and that living in a violent world, it would be intellectually and socially dishonest to depict life in any other way. If, however, in the novels which he reads, in the plays and films which he sees, and in the philosophical and ethical treatises which are presented for his education, Western man is continually subjected to a vision of himself as being violent, animalistic, alienated, mannerless, and uncivilized, then is he not being encouraged to identify with such an image and to mold his own outlook and behavior to conform with such an image? In 1869, Matthew Arnold defined culture as being a pursuit of our total perfection by means of getting to know, on all the matters which concern us, the best which has been thought and said in the world. Even the most charitable critic could find it difficult to reconcile Anthony Burgess's A Clockwork Orange or a play by Harold Pinner, for example, with this definition, and one may be pardoned for assuming that the worst that has been thought and said has supplanted the Arnoldian idea and become the contemporary cultural or anti-cultural norm, lest I be accused of indulging in unsupported generalizations. Perhaps I ought to provide specific examples, even at the risk of appearing to prove what is only too evident. 3 representatives, and therefore by no means extreme products of the contemporary theater, will perhaps suffice. And Osborne's A Patriot for Me. 2 males embrace on the stage, and Picasso's Le Désir attrape par la queue. A woman, aptly named Tarte, squats in a urinating position, while a soundtrack obligingly makes appropriate noises. In Genet's The Balcony, a man castrates himself. All 3 dramatists would doubtless claim that men do embrace, that women do urinate, that perhaps unbalanced men do occasionally castrate themselves. They would also assert that nothing on the contemporary stage can equal in horror the blinding of Gloucester in King Lear, or the events portrayed in Webster's The Duchess of Malfi, to take just 2 examples. There are, however, objections to these arguments. Firstly, the blinding of Gloucester, is that how you say it, is by no means the whole of Lear, nor is Lear the whole of Shakespeare. There is balance of light and dark, of hope and despair, of sublimity and degradation in his works, qualities which are absent from much of modern literature, nor is Webster necessarily the typical voice of the period of English literature. Spenser was also at work on The Faerie Queen. Sir Philip Sidney and Francis Bacon were producing respectively the Arcadia and the Novum Organum. In other words, the best minds of the Elizabethan and Jacobean age produced a dazzling variety of wealth, of ideas epitomized perhaps by the magical fusion of passion and intellect which colors all the writings of that remarkable man for all seasons, John Donne. Secondly, over the centuries, the cumulative wisdom or society has decreed that if males must embrace, they do so in private. Urination was also deemed to be a private affair, and presumably if a man must castrate himself, then he should do so in the privacy of his own house and not frighten the horses. In other words, the contemporary literary movement, while ostensibly bent on liberation, is in effect an attack on one of Western man's last and most cherished liberties, the liberty of privacy. The critic Anthony Lejeune recently asked if anyone really wants a society shaped by John Osborne for the delectation of Jimmy Porter, or plunged into lunacy by Harold Pinner, or peopled by the hideous imaginings of Genet or Beckett. He concludes that no one, including these writers, would wish to inhabit such a world, while Lejeune does emphasize the wide gap which exists between the abstract theoretical world presented to the public by these dramatists and the world of reality. He appears to ignore the mania for iconoclasm, which permeates the modern arts, and iconoclasm closely linked to egalitarianism. After all, the surest way to achieve complete and absolute equality is to reduce all men to the same level, to deny their dignity, to stress their animalism, and to snare at any form of idealism. Men and women are, superficially at least, most equal when copulating, masturbating, excreting, and urinating. And these are precisely the clinical aspects of human behavior that the contemporary avant-garde has battened on with a zeal formerly associated with the excesses of Puritanism. Indeed, what we are now witnessing both in the arts and in society as a whole is a new form of Puritanism, and inverted though it may be, it has the same totalitarian nature allied to a lack of humor and balance, which has always characterized Puritanism. This Puritanism has taken as part of its Decalogue the following tenets. You must not honor your father and mother. You must commit adultery, or if not married, fornicate like a ferret. You must covet, you must steal, and this you must do in order to bring about a more just and equal society. In short, do as you're told. Revolt. You must turn the page. An idea is, by definition, a concept or standard of supreme perfection, or in human terms, a person of the highest excellence. Egalitarianism, on the contrary, demands a uniform parity of behavior and even of attainment. Under these conditions, the idea becomes an enemy. It is regarded no longer as a mode of life to be emulated, but as a force to be destroyed, since its existence denies, or at least renders questionable, the whole basis of an egalitarian society. Contemporary authors, playwrights, and poets thus find themselves in a disconcerting dilemma. If they attempt to delineate an idea, they run the risk of being accused of snobbery, of being anti-proletarian, illiberal, undemocratic, and in certain cases even racist. Accordingly, all but a dwindling minority have joined the ranks of the iconoclasts, consoling themselves with the thought that they are allied to progress. Ezra Pound sadly expressed this dilemma when he wrote in Hugh Selwyn Malberly, the age demanded an image of its accelerated grimace, something for the modern stage, not, at any rate, an Attic grace. Even for the moment, adopting an egalitarian viewpoint, are we quite certain that everyone is mentally and morally prepared for the works of Pinter, Genet, Sartre, and Beckett? Have we yet fully taken into account, for example, the social effects not only of television but also of the paperback revolution, which, coinciding with new concepts expounded by and intended for tough, well-balanced adult minds, brings only too often to an ever-increasing youthful readership a distorted because unbalanced picture. Say that again. A youthful readership, a distorted because unbalanced picture of human life and human nature. Don't know what that means. The question is not so simple as it was in the comparatively elitist society of John Stuart Mill's time. It is no longer simply an either or between a discontented Socrates and a contented pig. Today, one must seriously question the possibility that the net result of the contemporary arts may be a society consisting largely of semi-educated, psychologically disturbed human beings. Already countless thousands of the young are demonstrating through drug reliance and other forms of self-destructive escapism that they have lost what Teilhard de Chardin called the essential taste for life. Reviewing the English edition of Trousered Apes in the Sunday Telegraph last year, Peregrine Worsthorne wrote as follows: when the Marquis de Sade originally pioneered the artist's exploration of the darker recesses of human depravity, he could at best hope to influence only a tiny fraction of his fellow citizens. His counterparts today, however, thanks to mass literacy and mass communications, can and do speak to all. Their messages of corruption, enjoying an ease of instant dissemination, an absence of contradiction, and the certainty of vulgarization that immediately transform them from a minority cult to a mass craving. Of course, the artist must be allowed to drive himself mad, but must he be allowed to drive us all mad? To those who may object that certain passages in this book are reactionary, I would simply suggest that if one saw a blind man tottering precariously on the edge of a cliff, one's instinctive reaction would be to counsel him to remain immobile and then to take a step backwards. Western society, blinded by its technological sophistication and neglectful of the things of the spirit, resembles in many ways just such a situation. If it proceeds on its present course, a course which has produced a society recently described as one consisting of technological giants and moral pygmies, then the seemingly inevitable end will be the extermination of the species, probably with a whimper rather than a bang. Man does, however, differ from other creatures which have become extinct in that he possesses the conceptual ability, if he will only exercise it, to realize where he stands in relation to his past and to his problematical future. What we are in danger of forgetting, however, is that no valid discussion of such a hypothetical future can, in the last analysis, ignore the question of human value. If a man is induced to regard himself as merely a trousered ape or a walking bag of seawater, certain scientists choose to see him, or a complex but predictable collection of reactions to various stimuli, as Dr. B.F. Skinner and other behaviorists assert, then he is simply an exceptionally extravagant, predatory, and messy mammal, and apart from a natural but sentimental loyalty to one's own species, his disappearance from the scene would ecologically be no disaster. However, as Joseph Wood Crutch has pointed out, man's arts, his religion, and his civilization, these are fair and wonderful things, but they are fair and wonderful to him alone. With the extinction of his poetry would be extinguished also the only sensibility for which it has any meaning, and there would remain nothing capable of feeling a loss. Great literature is that which, over the centuries, sustained and elevated mankind. It represents a conquest by man over the diverse and bewildering complexities of his own nature and of the world surrounding him. Such art involves a prodigious effort and concentration on the part of its creator and demands a cultivated response from its audience. As such, it is exclusive in terms of those who create it and those who can appreciate it. It therefore constitutes a minority culture and is to be detested and feared by the majority of contemporary artists and writers with their egalitarian aims and allegiance. Reinforced by the financial rewards of catering to an undiscriminating mass market. However, if much of contemporary literature no longer supports the human spirit, if on the contrary it spreads despair, alienation, emptiness, and spiritual sterility, then it should be challenged, since it is contrary to the survival of the species. Man is more than a physical animal. He needs above all hope to endure. The destruction of such hope and the dissemination of nihilism appear to be the message of the new Puritanism, which is not simply the old Puritanism writ large, but which springs from a barely concealed cultural, social, and individual death wish. In view of the urgency of the present cultural crisis, my aim has been to reach as wide a public as possible, and for this reason I have tried to write for the educated general reader and not the specialist. I must ask the latter's indulgence for many passages which have, no doubt to him, seemed either oversimplified or even elementary. Finally, I must acknowledge the kindness of Malcolm Muggeridge, who not only has supplied the eloquent foreword to this book, but has done so much to help and sustain me in all my work. No one could have had a more constant or generous friend. Did we go through the selected bibliography? Look at it if you will. I mean, there's a lot of books here. Pause it if you must, and you can see all that is included. There's the contents, or the index. I believe there's nothing more left. Goodbye, bruv. Here in England, the book began to be more and bootlegged. All right, that's all. Goodbye, bruv. Goodbye.